It's our turn, episode number 68. Call me Ishmael. In this episode, I'm joined by Jesse Metcalf, and we talk about the games we've played recently, and I interview Greg Loring Albright about his game based on the classic novel Moby Dick. Hosting for this episode is generously provided by our fantastic supporters on Patreon.com. If you'd like to help us out by pledging $1 per month or more, please visit patreon.com/OurTurnPodcast. Every dollar helps us to keep this show going strong. Hi, and welcome back to Our Turn. I'm Cathy Ford, and today I am joined by Jesse Metcalf, who is a contributor on our show. Jesse, welcome back.
Thanks. It's great to be back.
So we usually start the show by talking about what we've been playing lately. So why don't we go ahead and dive right in? Jesse, what have you been playing lately?
A friend of mine came over last week, and we broke out a game that I haven't played in a while. And it's a shame because it is a really good game. We broke out Champions of Midgard. This is by Grey Fox Games, designed by Ole Steinos. Artist is Victor Perez Corbella. This is, for me, one of my favorite worker placement games. You play a person who is an aspiring leader of a Viking village, and the other players and yourself are trying to gain the most glory. You do this by primarily fighting monsters. Every turn... Of course. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you? So there's going to be 8 turns in the game. Every turn, a troll is attacking the village, and Draugr, which are like undead, are also attacking the village. And then across the sea, there's also some monsters that you could either hire or build a ship to go fight. Your warriors are dice. You have shield dice, which have swords, which do damage, and shields, which can block damage. Spear people with spears and shields, same thing, but are slightly better. And then you have the blacksmith dice that do a lot of attacking and damaging but have no shields. So you're going to place some workers one at a time. Typical to most worker placers games, there's a place to get the new start player, so you can become the first player the next turn. Place to hire more dice, more warriors for your tableau. Place to get resources like food, so you can go on voyages, or wood, so you can carve runes or build ships, so you can go across. So obviously you can buy runes, which will give you a one-time special power and victory points at the end of the game. Or you can use money to buy favors, which you get the favor of the gods, which allows you to re-roll dice when you're in combat. So you take turn placing all your various Viking warriors, and then at the end of the turn, all the combat happens. That's when you assign your warrior dice. The troll's important, because if no one defeats the troll, everyone gets blame tokens, and blame tokens have a logarithmic negative experience point value at the end of the game. So 1 is worth -1. If you have 2, it's worth -3. 3 is, I believe, worth -6, all the way up to 5 or more, which is -15.
Oh, wow.
And a game where 100 is about a mean score, that can be a big hit. But if you defeat the troll, you get to get rid of one of your blame tokens and then assign a blame token to someone else. It's your fault the troll attacked the village. I took care of it. So that sort of thing. And the troll...
and the troll is completely innocent in the whole thing.
Oh yes. He had nothing to do with... He wandered into that village of his own accord, and it was an accident. Each of these monsters have an offense and defense. Offense is how many of your warrior dice they're going to kill in a combat round. Defense is how many hits you have to inflict upon them before they die, and it's simultaneous, basically. So having some people with shields to defend is always good, so you can preserve some dice, especially your very valuable black dice. And all of these give you some sort of victory points. Some give you money, some give you wood, some give you more favor of the gods. To get the really big experience point or victory point valued monsters, you have to go across the sea, which there's always an encounter at sea, which could throw people overboard or food overboard, or you have to fight a kraken, or all sorts of things just before you even get to the monster to fight. So sometimes you want to visit the seer or the oracle and see what's underneath those encounter cards to make sure you can plan for enough food and warriors to survive the trip. But the payoff is pretty big usually in both victory points and money. So that's in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but this is probably my favorite worker placement game. Some things have come out recently that might put that into contention, but it is a solid game. I give it a 5 on the rating scale. Go out and absolutely give this a try. So that was Champions of Midgard.
Yeah, this is one I haven't had a chance to play yet, and I love Viking-themed games. My ancestry is Danish, so it's an area of interest. But yeah, this is one I don't even think I've seen on the table.
It's usually compared to Lords of Waterdeep. It's very similar in mechanics. Lords of Waterdeep, however, doesn't have any random dice rolling to resolve. The thing I like about Champions of Midgard, it actually feels like a Viking game. I've played Lords of Waterdeep once, and it just feels like you're trading different colored cubes for bonuses. Mm-hmm. The fact that it happens to be a Dungeons and Dragons theme is kind of pasted on, and you could put any theme on there, or make it a complete Euro and have no theme, and it'd just be trading cubes for bennies. And I much prefer Champions of Midgard. So
now, how does this one compare to something like Blood Rage?
I have not had a chance to play Blood Rage, but from what I understand, that is more of a dudes on the map area control game.
Oh, okay, I see.
This is more of a worker placement game, like think of Agricola or Caverna would be a better comparison. But this has a little more, because it has the dice rolling, it's a little more Ameritrashy, if you pardon the term. So there's a little more randomness. You can mitigate that with Favor of the Gods for rerolls. But I think this is a lot of fun. And again, compared to a lot of worker placement games, I really like this one.
Okay, so that's Champions of Midgard. And for you, this is an absolute go out and buy it now.
Yes, absolutely. And the expansions were kickstarted and fulfilled last year, and they add quite a bit of variety too. So
nice. All right. I will keep an eye out for that. And just a shout out to any of my local friends here in Sacramento. If you happen to own this game and we're at an event together, look me up because it sounds like a lot of fun. My first game that I'm going to talk about is Dominion. A couple episodes ago when Sarah was on the show, she did a review of Dominion. So I won't go into all the mechanics and everything of it. But for her, this is like one of her favorite games of all time. And I had never played it. And so she highly recommended that I give it a try. And my friend Richard Bright, hi Richard, he listened to the episode and could not believe that I had not yet played Dominion. And so we got together at a library game day this last weekend, and he pulled out Dominion, and we sat down and played a 2-player game of it. Actually, we played 2 games of it. And we played with 2 of the expansions in each game, and I'm drawing a blank on what they were right now. But one was Prosperity, and I'm drawing a blank on all the others, and I don't have my phone here in front of me.
Was it Intrigue?
Intrigue was one, yes.
That was like the first major expansion, and it's pretty popular. In fact, I think it rates higher than the base game on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, in the past I've stated that deck builders are not my thing. There are a couple that I like, but overall, I just haven't been impressed with them. And I've tried to play Ascension, and I've played the Marvel deck building game, and just couldn't grok either of them. The big problem I have with the Marvel deck building game is that in the end of the game, the superheroes are competing against one another. And to me, that's cognitive dissonance. The superheroes aren't supposed to compete against one another.
Yes. That is a game that should have been a full co-op bar none.
Exactly.
The Legendary Encounters games like Alien and Predator are full co-ops, and they're so much better as an experience than the Marvel one. So that was a big miss.
Yeah, I played Legendary Encounters Firefly, of course, and absolutely enjoyed it. Absolutely loved it. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm just giving deck builders a bad rap. But I haven't really had much of a chance to play any others. One that I have played and enjoyed is Professor Pugnacious, and it has a great big long name. I don't remember the whole thing. And that is a steampunk-themed deck builder, and I've enjoyed that. It's got a different kind of mechanism to it, but I kind of shied away from the 2 big standards, which are Ascension and Dominion, just because I'd played Ascension and hadn't understood it, and had never tried Dominion, and hesitated buying my own copy because there are so many gazillion expansions.
Sure.
And so Richard brought everything that he has for it and used an app to set up the game, and we played through, and he beat me, which was no surprise. And then I said, can we try it again? And because we were still waiting for some other games to finish up. And he said, sure, no problem. And so he set it up again using a couple of different expansions, and we played through again, and I lost again. But I'm happy to say I had a good experience playing this game, and I would absolutely play it again. I give Dominion a good solid 4, and I think that's pretty good considering I've only played it twice. So that is Dominion by Donald X. Vaccarino and published by Rio Grande Games. It was published in 2008. I take it you're a fan, Jesse?
I love deck builders. Dominion definitely earns the title of the grandfather of deck builders. Is inspired a lot. I like it a lot more than the center row builders like Ascension because you can customize and what cards will show up in your game, and there's no randomness to that. They're just there. I've played several expansions for it, mixed and matched. I've taught it to a lot of people. It's a solid game. I think it's one of those entry-level games that will teach you a basic understanding of deck building that you can apply to all the crazy deck building games that have come out since then.
I think, playing the Firefly deck builder and and Professor Pugnacious has helped me understand deck builders a little better. And I think I'm more willing now to give that mechanism another try.
So my question is, have you played Clank yet?
No, I have not.
All right. That was a game I thought about talking about in the show notes. Clank takes deck building and makes it part of the mechanism for moving and fighting through a dungeon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it takes this great mechanic, which is a pretty decent standalone mechanic, and then combines it with dungeon crawling to create a really cool experience. So
nice.
I encourage you to give that one a try too.
I've heard pretty good things about Clank, so yeah, I've been on the lookout for a game to play that as well. So
if only we lived closer.
Yes, well, you're in Nebraska and I'm in California, so we've got 2 mountain ranges between us.
Meh. What are you going to do?
Anyway, so that's Dominion. What else have you been playing, Jesse?
Recently, I've been playing this off and on in the last year or so. And I got to sit down and play it with my wife, and she agrees she would play it again, which makes this a winner. And that is Viticulture. This was the Essential Edition. Let's see. Jamie Stegmaier, Alan Stone, and others were the designers. Artists include Jackie Davis, David Montgomery, and Beth Sobel, whose art I really enjoy. It's a Stonemaier Games production, published in 2015, my popular year for the evening. So you're making wine, which, if you're not into wine, might seem like a dull tactic, but stick with me. I've played Scythe a lot, and so I'm familiar with it. So when I sat down to play this, the first thing I said, this has got Stegmaier's thumbprints all over it, because the wooden pieces look similar, but all of it, the mechanics of it all, and everything, how the interaction is, and the design and everything, just this is a Jamie Stegmaier game, which is a good thing, because he cranks out excellent games.
He does.
Yes. So in the base game, and I'll get to the rest in a second. But the base game, there are 4 seasons. In the springtime, you decide when your workers are going to awake, which will determine the turn order. The later you wait to wake up, the better the benefits generally that you will get for waiting. Like if you want to be first, you're going to get nothing. But if you wait to be 7th out of 7, you can get an extra worker that's a gray meeple instead of a colored one like your own, that you get to use for the turn. So, or if you need money or more cards, there's benefits for waiting if you don't mind being last. So, again, in the spring you choose turn order. Summer you start placing workers in the first half of the worker placement area. So, things you can do in summer are getting grapes to plant, planting those grapes, having a summer visitor, giving tours of the winery, and so on. And that's kind of the first half of the game. You really want to focus on getting your vineyard really prepped and ready to go. Then the fall happens, and you get to draw either a summer or winter visitor card. And then in the winter, you place your winter workers. So things there include harvesting grapes and then stomping grapes into wine. and then fulfilling wine orders, which is really, fulfilling wine orders is the primary focus of the game. It's easy to get lost in that with all the other moving parts and all the other places to put workers, but really fulfilling wine orders will give you the big share of victory points, and also gives you residuals that you collect, because it's really hard to earn money in this game unless you have a plan. With residuals, it gives you a few lira every turn to spend, and that can make a huge difference. Getting a really easy to fulfill wine order early on to get that small little residual started is really helpful. There's lots of different strategies for points, for getting victory points and for income, but that's a pretty easy one for a beginning player to grab onto. And we do this until someone gets to 20 victory points, at which point the game immediately ends at the end of that season. You count up the total victory points. It's pretty easy peasy. And again, if you've played Scythe or any of other Jamie's other games, this will come pretty natural. So
yeah,
Viticulture.
He does seem to have a style of game.
Yes.
And yeah, I enjoy Euphoria. I've played Viticulture. I don't own it, but I played it and I've enjoyed that. And then Scythe I've also enjoyed. I'm trying to think if there's any others that spring to mind.
Charterstone?
Oh yeah, Charterstone. Yeah, I've been enjoying Charterstone quite a bit too.
Yeah, I'm envious. I've been wanting to get that started, but I haven't gotten a play group together. But I've heard amazing things about that too. And
yeah, we just finished games 9 and 10 of our Charterstone game series. And so there's 2 more to go. And then this weekend, Mark and I are getting together with Sarah and Will and a couple of their friends to start a whole new game. So,
envious right now.
It's a good game. I enjoy it. And Viticulture is also a good game. What rating would you give it?
I'd give it a 4. If you get the Tuscany expansion, which adds a whole lot more game to the game,
I've heard that.
It becomes a 5. You have 4 seasons. There's worker placement spots in every season, spring, summer, fall, winter. So you really have to plan out what it is you're doing. And in large player counts, that can be very tricky. Thankfully, the number of slots to put a worker scales with the number of players, but that can still get crowded if you have 6 players and 4 of them want to plant this turn and 3 of them are ahead of you. You'll end up using your I forget the technical name, but the grande worker that can be placed anywhere regardless if there's a spot or not. You might have to end up using that early on. So yeah, it's a solid game. The Essential Edition's enough game for anyone. The expansion's really nice, but not necessary. So I give it a 4.
Okay. Now, I thought the Essential Edition came with the Tuscany expansion.
It came with elements from the previous expansions, but there's a Tuscany Essential Edition, which adds the bigger board and even more expansions to it. The Essential Edition for Viticulture has the Mamas and Papas, which gives you a variable starting setup, and there's a couple other small things they threw in that don't come to mind right now.
Okay. Like I said, I've only played it once, and I think we only played it 3-player. But yeah, it's a beautiful game. It's a fun game. So, excellent.
Yeah.
My next game is The Castles of Burgundy, the card game. So if you've ever played Castles of Burgundy, you're building up your little province in Burgundy, which is in France, and you're building these little castles, and you're putting different resources around it. And it's been a while since I've played Castles of Burgundy. It's a fun game, though. But this is that game adapted to just cards. In the other game, you're using dice to place things quite a bit. So in the card game, the dice are replaced by these cards with dice on them. And then you take different resource cards and you lay them out along, the dice cards are laid out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you lay out these other cards along the dice track, and you have to use the cards in your hand, which you're dealt, I want to say 6 cards every turn. And you can use those cards to buy other resource cards to build up your resources, your castle. It's a very much simplified version of Castles of Burgundy. It was real easy for Richard to explain it. Again, Richard Bright at the Library Game Day introduced this to me. He explained it really quickly. There were 4 of us playing. I think 3 of us had played Castles of Burgundy. No, I think all 4 of us had. The other one was a gentleman that we hadn't met before and weren't quite sure what his gaming experience was, but he picked it up real quick. And if I recall correctly, he won the game. His name was Nick. Hi, Nick. Once we got into this game, we developed kind of a rhythm, and you just go through, you buy your resources, you move resources over and add them to your castle, and you can sell goods to get money. Anyway, it's very similar to Castles of Burgundy, but like I said, it's a lot more streamlined. Both Castles of Burgundy and Castles of Burgundy, the card game, were designed by Stefan Feld. He's a very well-known game designer. And it's published by Ravensburger, and it came out in 2016. And just having played this just once, I would give it a 4. I'd really like to play it again so I can get the rules and the explanation down a little better. I know my explanation here isn't all that great, but it is essentially Castles of Burgundy simplified and streamlined, and no dice, just cards. There's pictures of dice, but it's all just cards. Have you ever played this one or played Castles of Burgundy?
I have played Castles of Burgundy, the card game. I owned it briefly. I played it solo a few times, and then I unloaded it. I was not a fan of it. I imagine I will not like Castles of Burgundy, the board game, either. It's an okay game, don't get me wrong, and I can see why some people would like it. It's just not for me.
Oh, sure. No, there are so many games out there that there are going to be games that some people like and other people don't, and that's fine.
Yeah. Good grief. There's tens of thousands of games out there. There's something out there for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'm very interested in your next one. I haven't heard of this one.
Okay, well, I thought I'd talk about a bit of role playing because that's kind of what I do. So lately, I've been playing D&D with a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons with a bunch of friends, and we're almost done with Storm King's Thunder, which is an adventure published for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Oh, okay.
Published by Wizards of the Coast, published in 2016. And there are some great designers behind this, including Mike Merles and Christopher Perkins, 2 names that are very popular on Twitter. It also has Jenna Holland, Adam Lee, and Richard Witters. I can't go into the nuts and bolts of Dungeons and Dragons right now, so if you want a fuller explanation, talk to me offline, and we can talk about that. But the basic gist of this one, it feels like a remake of Against the Giants, a classic first edition game where the god of the giants decide that the giants themselves have been too complacent. So I'm going to sunder the ordning, which is the commandment that puts these giants in a hierarchy with the stormed giants on top. And so there's a plot involved, which I won't get into many details so I don't spoil it in case someone wants to play it. And the characters become embroiled from a very low level. It becomes apparent that the giants are slowly getting behind things and causing events in which they have to figure out. So there's politics, there's intrigue, there's lots of combat because it's Dungeons and Dragons. So I just wanted to talk about it as a review, that this is a great campaign book. It gives a lot of good information of the Forgotten Realms, especially the Sword Coast and the environs therein. But as an adventure, it feels like the plot is a little weaker than most of their publications. And as a dungeon master, if you're a first-time dungeon master, I would say stick with the beginner box or other publications. This one takes a lot of prep time and a lot of work. There's a lot of nuts and bolts, and I feel like if this were a campaign book or a campaign setting information guide, a manual of campaign information, it would be great. But as an adventure, it's just, at times I'm feeling I'm reaching to make it work. So on the OTP scale, I would give it a 2, only because I feel it requires a lot more effort on the part of the GM, of the Dungeon Master, to prep in order to make this work. But I have been playing it for a couple months now with friends, and probably been dominating most of my game time lately. So I thought I'd talk about it and give people a little information about it.
Sure.
So, again, if you want resources about the Forgotten Realms and don't mind shelling out the MSRP for it, it's pretty good. But as an adventure, I'd say they got plenty of other published adventures that are much better than this one. So that's Storm King's Thunder.
Were you running this as the DM, or were you involved as a player?
I was the DM for this. This is a group of newer D&D players, and they're a bunch of fun. So shout out to Chris, Scott, D, and others. And it's been a really good time teaching them D&D, and they've really gotten into making characters, and they're having a heck of a time. And I looked at this and I thought, oh, this would be right up their alley, and we're only going to do the latter part of it, which is the nuts and the real meat of the adventure. So it'll be fun. And it has turned out to be a little bit of a slog. There are good parts, but again, as a whole, it's just... I put in the show notes, what number is hot mess? There's hot parts and then there's mess parts, and together it's just a hot mess. So. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Some are going to come out like that.
Yeah, it is what it is.
All right. Yeah, I've been playing in a D&D adventure with my friend Doc Cross running it. Hi, Doc. And I've been having a real good time with that. I really like the D&D 5th edition. What do you think of it?
I think it is the best edition they've published, and I've played since basic D&D, the Moldavie Red Box from 1983. So all editions 1st through 5th, I have played them all extensively, and yeah, this is the best one they've cranked out. It's got enough crunch for people, but I felt like 3rd edition got bogged down in so many options. And 4th edition was basically a tactical game turned into a role-playing game. I felt more board game than RPG at times.
Okay.
But this took like the best parts of every edition they published up to this point and really made a streamlined, solid game. You can find nits to pick, but overall, I think this one's the best.
Okay. Excellent. All right. My last game that I'm going to talk about is one that I have talked about on here before, and that is Concordia. Have you played Concordia, Jesse?
Shout out to the folks at the board game store who tried to teach me Concordia. I was all ears. I looked at it and said no. So I've seen it played, and it's a solid game, but it is not for me. The theme doesn't grab me, and there's not enough to excite me.
The theme is basically trading in the Mediterranean, and it is strictly a Euro game. It is worker placement, area control. There's a slight bit of deck building in that you start with a hand of cards. Everybody starts with the same hand of cards, and then you're buying these cards off a market, and that is the deck building aspect of it. And it's also resource management. It's a point salad game, But it seems like every time I play this game, I have a great time. It took me 2 or 3 plays to understand how the scoring worked and how the cards that you're buying worked with it. And I think I won my 3rd game once all that clicked into place. I did not win this game. In fact, I think I came in dead last, if I remember right. But I still always seem to have a good time with it. And so, is it an awesome game that everybody's going to like? Well, you've just said you don't like this game at all, and that's fine. But I really enjoy this. Every time it comes out, I have a good time with it. And it isn't an overly complex game. So it's a good game to end the evening with. If you're looking for, a good game with great mechanics that you just want to play one more game, but you don't want to do like a filler, You want something a little crunchier than a filler, but not like something that it's going to take you 4 to 6 hours to play. So, yeah, I really enjoy Concordia. Last time I reviewed it, I gave it a 4. I'm going to up my rating to a 4.5. And I believe it came out recently with a new edition, and I learned this weekend that there are other maps for it, which I was all excited about because I'd like to try it with other maps. I didn't even know that on the reverse side of the board there's another map. There's a map of just Italy. So it's just trading in Italy. So I'm excited to try some of the other maps. I'm actually actively looking for a copy for myself. So that is Concordia, published by Rio Grande Games, designed by Mac Gertz, and it initially came out in 2013.
Yeah, it's a solid game. So don't take my opinion as gospel. It is number 24 as of the recording of this on the BGG rating. So it's obviously a good game. I hear it shines better with Concordia Salsa expansion to add the salt element to it as a wild card.
Oh, I haven't played with that. So
yeah, it changes some of the spots on the board to have salt, which basically becomes a really powerful wild card for your goods. So again, much like Viticulture, it really shines with the expansion. And yeah, it's a solid game, just not for me.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so that's what we've been playing. We have set up and been referring to and rating games by our own rating scale. Here's how we are using this scale. 5. Buy this now. 4. A good solid game. 3. Decent with some bugs. 2. Has great potential as kindling. And 1. Give me back the time I spent playing it. Joining me for the interview today is Greg Loring Albright. He has a new project on Kickstarter that I am very excited about. I love games based on both classic literature and history. In episode number 67, we featured an RPG based on the collected works of Jane Austen. Today, we're talking about a tabletop board game from a different genre and period of history, but no less a great work of literature. Greg's project is called Leviathan and is based on the novel Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Greg Loring Albright, welcome to Our Turn.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Cathy.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in game design.
Sure. So right now I'm a graduate student. That's what I do with my days when I'm not making games. But I got started in game design working with my friend Andy, who runs Waxwing Puzzle Company there in Chicago. And they make real world pervasive games, sort of like room escapes without a room.
Oh, okay.
So I started working with him. I was living in Chicago. I was looking for something to do, and one thing led to another, and suddenly I was chasing people around the tunnels underneath downtown Chicago with a laser pointer. And those lessons of making those sorts of games translate really easily into tabletop design. So we both liked playing games and sort of learning about how games were made. So that led to me sort of taking the plunge into game design.
Nice. Yeah, I admire people who can do that. People say that, every game player wants to be a game designer, and I just shake my head and say, nope, not interested. But I really admire people who can do it. Now, your game is based on Moby Dick.
That's right.
Most of us have read Moby Dick in high school. It's been a required reading since my mom was, in high school, probably since my grandmother was in high school. But I can guarantee that not many of us have the love of this novel that you seem to.
Yeah, I like Moby Dick a lot. I think I can't speak to high schools now. I'm long out of that, but I didn't have to read it in high school.
Oh,
I
really?
actually took a special semester-long maritime studies program when I was an undergrad in college, in part because Moby Dick was on the syllabus, and I said, this seems like something I should read, and I'm never going to read it if I don't have a professor telling me you have to read this chapter by this day. So I got involved in this program in no small part because I knew it would force me to read Moby Dick. And I'm really glad I did because it's my absolute favorite book.
Oh, nice. Now, I'll admit, I did reread the book as an adult, and I enjoyed it much more as an adult than I did in high school. Actually, I was kind of spurred to read it by the movie Major League. Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's a baseball movie, but the interplay between one of the main characters and his girlfriend, she really wants him to get into things that interest her. And one of the things that interests her is literature. And so he said, fine, I'll read Moby Dick. And the next thing you see is him reading Moby Dick, the comic book. It was Moby Dick in comic book form. And later, he's trying to get the girl back kind of thing. And she asks him a question based on Moby Dick, and he was able to answer it, because he'd read this comic book based on the novel. And I thought, that's a book that I tried to skip in high school, and I just decided I need to reread that. And I actually went back and reread several things from classic literature that I had tried to blow off as a kid. So
many of those books I feel like are not for kids. Like, it's good. I think it's good to read classic literature, but so many of the themes in Moby Dick are just very adult. Like this notion of like a driving obsession, or like this sort of contentious relationship with the natural or the divine. Like, these are things that I didn't really get as a kid that I totally get now.
Did you ever see the TV movie with Patrick Stewart as Ahab?
I haven't. I actually try to avoid filmed versions of my favorite books because I worry that they'll disappoint me. Although Sir Patrick Stewart's great, so maybe it's awesome.
He did a fantastic job in that one.
Well, maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about your game Leviathan.
Yeah, so Leviathan is a 2-player micro card game that's a tabletop miniatures game without the miniatures. So one player takes the role of Moby Dick and a pod of whales, and they have 4 whales and 2 tricks of the light, and the game's asymmetrical. So that player has, it's not quite hidden movement. Their cards are visible on the table, but all their cards are face down. So their opponent doesn't know which whale is which. And you're using a template card to move these cards around the table, sort of like in a game like Wings of War, X-Wing or something. So that's the Moby Dick player. And then the Ahab player is using the same movement mechanism. They start with just one card, the whale ship, the Pequod, and then they can lower more whale boats at a strategic time when they think it's their best option to try and strike one of the whales and see if it's Moby Dick or not. And then of course, Moby Dick wins by sinking the Pequod and killing Ahab. Ahab wins by killing Moby Dick.
Now, I should point out for anybody who's not familiar with Moby Dick that, this is a small wooden boat or wooden ship. And when you're saying whaling boats, you're talking large rowboats. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, they used to put people into these rowboats, lower them into the ocean, and then they would go out and throw harpoons at the whales among a pod of whales.
Yep.
And then they would, once they killed a whale, which I'm guessing was a huge undertaking, they would drag it back to the ship and start to process it there.
Yeah. And as you'll know, if you read Moby Dick, and probably know if you're a human being alive today, like, killing whales is terrible and gross. But there's this sort of like, in Moby Dick, it's presented. Melville doesn't really beat around the bush. He's like, no, this is pretty gross and terrible, but he's interested in these people's lives nonetheless, and that's really interesting. I appreciate that about the book, that it's able to sort of get you invested in the lives of these people who, a lot of whom are terrible people.
Yeah, it was a hard time too. I mean, back then, people used whale oil to light their homes. And probably to some extent heat their homes. Yep. So it was an actual real natural resource, which of course we've replaced now. But I like the way you've used Moby Dick as a character to, guide these other whales and fight back, which was one of the aspects of the book, was Moby Dick fought back.
Yeah, that's right. And has the absolute upper hand pretty much the whole time. When I first started sort of conceiving of this game, it's like very first draft that I don't think I ever even prototyped, but I wanted to make a game about whales and whaling because I had spent a lot of time studying this thing, and I wanted to make a game where the whales could strike back. So my first sort of draft was a co-op where all the players are whales and you're trying to sink whale ships all around the world. You know how the development process goes. One thing changes and things become other things. Eventually it became this game where one player is playing someone who kills whales, but the other player is playing the whales who have a decent chance at striking back.
Nice. So what made you decide to make it a sort of a miniature game?
Yeah, I was inspired by the folks at Button Shy Games, Jason Tagmeyer and those folks, they make these mini games.
Mm-hmm.
And a few years ago, they had an 18 card game contest. And I thought that would be a really interesting thing to enter into. So I was starting to think about what you can do with 18 cards. And I had just played X-Wing, the Fantasy Flight miniatures game, for the first time, was really interested in this notion of, well, if I'm very limited in my components, if I only have 18 cards, maybe I can use the space of the table as another component, as sort of a way to like cheat the constraint a little bit. So that's where that side of the game came from. I'm not like deep into the miniatures or the wargaming scene at all. These are pretty new worlds for me to be in, but I really appreciate the creative use of real space in the game world.
Nice. Now, I was looking at your Kickstarter campaign, and the artwork that you have on this, it says all over the Kickstarter campaign, this is not the final artwork, but what I've seen is lovely. Can you tell me a little bit about the artist you're working with?
Yeah, the art is incredible. So after I entered the game into Button Shy's contest, it was a finalist, but it didn't win. They didn't go with it at that point. And so Jason's really great about keeping creators having their rights to their work. So I shopped it around, and Jeff at Past Go Games picked it up. He's publishing it. We're running this Kickstarter through Past Go. And as soon as one of the first things he said when we sort of, verbally shook hands and he sent the contract over was, I know the perfect artist for this game. And he sent me Andrew Thompson, the artist, who had this really dynamic comic style that is not at all what I expected and not what I was thinking of. My edition of Moby Dick is the University of California press with Barry Moser's woodcuts, and it's very classic and very sort of like serious and grim, and I love it. And that was sort of my initial vision for the art. And then Jeff showed me Andrew's art, and in particular, the way Andrew renders water. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. So that's the credit goes to Jeff and to Andrew on that one. If it was up to me art directing this game, it would look totally different and nice. Not nearly as cool.
The project on Kickstarter is going until Sunday, March 4th. Is that right?
Let me check. I have it up right here. We're going to Monday, March 5th.
Oh, Monday, March 5th. Okay. So what's included in the different levels of the project, the different pledge levels?
Yeah. So the smallest level is the $5 P&P. So once Andrew finishes the artwork, Jeff will send out the finished print files formatted for printing on a printer. It's not very resource heavy. It's an 18 card game, so it'll take you 2, maybe 3 pages to print. That's the $5 tier. The $11 tier is sort of like the basic. You get the game. You pay $11. You still get those P&P files. You get a copy of the game. Shipping is, I think, $5 on top of that.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah, and then the sort of deluxe tier is $36. You get the P&P files, you get the game, and then you get a 3-foot square vinyl battle mat. And this was also one of Jeff's editions that I really liked. These mats are really common in wargaming. It just sort of sets the field of play so that if your table's huge, you could play a game of Leviathan that would take an hour and a half, and it's supposed to be a 15 to 30 minute game. But because it involves real space, that's a variable. So these mats sort of set a nice playable field that says the game will work as designed on this mat. You can obviously play it without. You can play it on a bigger table or a smaller table. But the mat is a nice add-on, and the mat will have Andrew's artwork. He's going to paint a seascape for us. So you'll get even more of that beautiful art.
Nice. Now, you've already passed your funding goal, correct?
Yes. We're very happy about it. This is our second time running the project, and the first time it did not fund.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations. What stretch goals do you have?
We don't have any stretch goals. Okay. Jeff and I talked about this, and that's because the game is the game. It's set. We have some tactical cards that you can mix in to kind of vary the game a little bit, but it was conceived of as a small project. There's a few cards. It's designed to be portable. It's designed to be small. Money that comes in over and above the goal that turns into profit will no doubt go to fund more and better artwork. As you mentioned, the final artwork isn't done. There are a few samples on the page. Okay. But part of the reasoning behind not finishing all the art, in addition, I'm sure, to not having the money and needing to run the Kickstarter to get the money, was that we can sort of make a commission to Andrew based on how much the project funds. So it's going to be great art no matter what, but it'll be even greater and greater if it funds more, I think.
I love the way that so many games, especially Kickstarter projects, are pouring so many resources into artwork. I just got one delivered here recently called The Lady and the Tiger. And
yes, that's a beautiful game. It is a
gorgeous game. And I'm torn between wanting to have it framed and put up on my wall and wanting to play the game on the table. I just love the way that so many of these projects are putting resources into the artwork, because it makes it a joy to play over and above the joy that you get out of playing a game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the sort of miniatures-esque aspect of this game will really be enhanced by the artwork, because you lay it out and it sort of covers your table, and you'll have these beautiful pieces of art. Sort of, it looks nice when you lay it all out there. You'll have pretty much all the cards visible at all times. So it'll be the art is a nice addition to that aspect of the game for sure.
Great. So this looks like a fantastic 2-player game. I wish you luck on your project. Is there anything new in the wings for you? Another project in development, maybe?
Oh, there's always ideas floating around. There's some. I never know really. I'm very new to this whole thing of publishing games. This is my first published game. So I never know how much you're supposed to talk about and not talk about, but I'll talk about something that I've been floating out there to a few people, and nothing's happened with it yet, but I keep developing it and redeveloping it, and hopefully something will happen with it. And that's McDougal Street. I love folk music and the 60s Greenwich Village folk scene, and so I'm working on a light, easy to play worker placement and auction game where everyone becomes Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and those kind of folks.
What a great idea. That's a theme I don't think I've ever seen in a game before.
Well, that's good to hear. That's part of my pitches. It's a unique theme, and I'm like, I hope it's a unique theme. I've done my research, but
yeah. Well, congratulations on funding already, and we will have a link to your project in our show notes for anybody that is interested in backing your project. You're going until March 5th. So if you're listening to this show before March 5th, go check out Greg's project and take a look at Leviathan. It looks fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for giving us the shout out and giving me the time to talk about it, Cathy. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Greg. All right, so now we're getting to the end of the show, and it's time to start looking ahead at what we've got planned for the coming weeks. And Jesse, what have you got on your plate?
Well, aside from the usual sort of bi-weekly D&D game I mentioned earlier, this weekend is the Great Plains Game Festival here in Lincoln, Nebraska, going from
How fun.
Yeah, from Friday to Sunday. I'm excited that it's a hometown event, so I want to support it because, hey, anytime you can get a local convention, support the heck out of it. That's one less hotel bill and travel you have to plan. So the cool part about this festival is they reach out to various board game distributors and say, hey, do you have a bunch of games in your back stock that aren't selling well? Because we're willing to take it off your inventory. And a lot of them will give them to them for just the price of shipping, or so I'm told. So what they do is they get a bunch of these games, and then with your paid weekend admission, you will get a free board game. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of a cool perk of this convention.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I missed last year because I had strep throat on that weekend, and that was the most horrific of horrifics. So I asked nicely via email, hey, can I just apply my weekend registration this year? And they absolutely worked with me and made that happen. So
nice.
Big shout out to the Great Plains Game Festival. They're a bunch of good stand-up people who love the community. So that's what I'm looking forward to this weekend. And then Crystal Paisano mentioned on Twitter once that she would love to play a joined trill in a Star Trek game. And I noticed that and said, well, I have the latest edition of the Star Trek Adventures RPG. Do you want to play? And I think the words yes flew out of my monitor and shattered my ears. So she was enthusiastic, as she can be about things, and which is awesome. So I asked her...
No, not Crystal.
Oh, no.
Crystal enthusiastic? What?
The ladies at Board Game Blitz, they are awesome people. And
They are.
I hope
They're
someday
fantastic.
to go to BlitzCon and meet them all. But so I asked her, who would you like to play with? Give me some names. So she mentioned Joe Sondow. He runs a ton of Twitter accounts, including at Picard Tips, at Riker Googling, at Worf Email, at Emoji Aquarium, at Emoji Meadow, and at Star Trek Hour, which I believe is a podcast about Star Trek. So he has a Patreon. If you enjoy these things, check him out on Twitter. Think about throwing him a buck or two, because, oh my gosh, Riker Googling and Worf Email are just hilarious. They are my favorites.
I'm going to have to look those up. I've met John and I've met Crystal. They were both at Board Game BlitzCon last year when we went. We didn't go this year. And yeah, he's a great guy. Crystal's wonderful. Ambi's great too. Now, your next person that you're going to be playing with, I have not met, but I have talked with him online.
Yeah, Mason Weaver was also suggested. He contributes to the Five Bike podcast, which is a fun light podcast, much like Board Game Blitz. You can digest it in about half an hour, 45 minutes. Just about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great podcast.
And I'm very excited. We've been chatting on Twitter. It's really hard with all our busy lives, obviously, with all the things we do, to find a time, but we're looking to get together next week and make characters. I've already got their ship, and none of them wanted to be captain, so I'll be NPCing a captain for sure. And I already have the ship done. So I've put in a few hours of work researching, plotting, and so I'm very excited to try this out. It'll be my first time running a game online and my second time running a Star Trek game. So it's a little... Thankfully, Modifius has put out a good adventure book for it, and the rules are solid, and I'm really excited and looking forward to it. Hopefully the four of us can get together and make this happen.
And what are you going to be using to connect everybody?
We're balancing between Skype or Google Hangouts. We've talked about Roll20, which is very cool, but that's a lot of bells and whistles that I don't think we need. This isn't a very tactical game. It's very much theater of the mind. You could make it tactical, I suppose. D&D is a lot more tactical with its grid movement and miniatures and stuff, but this I think we can get away with not having such. So,
is it more of an ROLE playing game rather than an ROLL playing game?
Yeah. It's a very simple system, but yet it's complex enough to be able to do so much with so little. Star Trek Adventures is pretty solid. The PDF is very inexpensive right now. It's at an introductory price over at DriveThruRPG. Even if you get it for just the art and the cool... Man, half the book is like lore. So that's worth the price of admission right there. The role-playing game on top of that is just outstanding. So I highly recommend people check it out, and I'll give updates as we go.
Excellent. All right. Well, that sounds like a ton of fun. This last week has been a little bit on the stressful side for me. My husband, Mark, was in the hospital. Thankfully, he's out now. He's feeling better. So I'm looking forward to him getting healthier. And then we have been playing Charterstone at my friends Amy and Mike's house. Hi, Amy. Hi, Mike. And Sarah mentioned that she and Will have finished their game of Charterstone, and now they've purchased the recharge pack and they want to play it again, but they want to play it with a full group. So Mark and I got invited to that, and that is coming off this weekend. So we are looking forward to getting in another game of Charterstone with a different group. So that should be a lot of fun.
Good deal. I hope Mark gets to feeling better, and I'll say it again, so jealous right now. Charterstone. Oh. Someday.
It's a fun game, and I feel real lucky that I have two different friends that went out and bought it and have invited me to play. So yeah, it was funny after we'd played this game a few times. Mark goes, "Ooh, we should get a copy for ourselves." I'm like, "Why?" We've got friends that are willing to invite us to play their copy. We've got a couple of legacy games sitting on our shelf that it's so hard to get people together for legacy games on a regular basis. So I'm not willing to purchase it to have it on our shelf, but I will sit down and play it anytime. It's a great game. The turns go quickly. There's a rhythm to the game once you get it going. And I find that there's a lot of fun and a lot of laughter in the game while you're playing it. So, and got to watch out for that Forever King. And that's all I'll say about the story of the game.
Cool.
So anyway, thank you for joining me, Jesse.
Well, thank you for having me. This is excellent as always.
So, Jesse, before we go here, how can people connect with you online?
The easiest way is to find me on Twitter at Jess Metcalf, JESMETCALF. You can also find me on The Geek, both Board Game Geek and RPG Geek. My handle there is MadcapCH. Those are the best ways to find me.
All right. And I run the Twitter handle for Our Turn Podcast, which is at Our Turn Podcast. And I also am the guild master on BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 2600. And then we also have a page on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Our Turn Podcast. And Sarah Reed runs that page. And so if you want to chat with her there, that's where you can connect with her. And then I also have my own Twitter handle, which is at Cathy's Brain, and that's Cathy with a C. I try to check it at least once a week, but I just have so much fun over on the Our Turn Podcast Twitter handle that I forget to go check in on that. So, all right, until next time, on behalf of the entire Our Turn Podcast crew, that was our turn.
Now it's yours.
Thank you for listening. This episode was recorded on February 21st, 2018, and is written and produced by Cathy Ford and Jesse Metcalf with assistance from Greg Loring Albright and Mark Ford. Next time, we will discuss the benefits of board gaming. We want and encourage your questions, comments, and feedback. Please call 916-426-2873 and leave us a short voicemail, or send an email to feedback@ourturnpodcast.com. Our theme music was composed by Adriana Crickle. Incidental music was provided by Ben Sound. Please check out our show notes to learn more about these talented artists. The material in this episode is copyrighted under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. If you want to learn more about the games discussed in this episode, please visit our website at ourturnpodcast.com/episode 68. You can find a list of the games along with links to their listing on BoardGameGeek.com. We are proud members of the Dice Tower Network. You can find out about other shows in the network like The Game Pit, Blue Peg, Pink Peg, or The Snakes Cast by going to dicetowernetwork.com. Thank you for your support. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about us.